Welcome back to another episode of the What Are You Made Of podcast with your boy, Mike C-Roc. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the encouragement. Thank you for following the What Are You Made Of movement and the concept of rocket fuel, where we turn setbacks, letdowns, difficulties, and negative people into rocket fuel for our future. And today I'm excited to have my friend, the John Roa. John is a lifelong entrepreneur, technologist, philanthropist, business investor, and writer. He has founded and managed 6 tech companies since learning to program at age 11. Man, I got a story that starts at 11 too, but it wasn't about learning to program. His largest company, ÄKTA, I think I pronounced that properly, right, John? ÄKTA?
Close.
ÄKTA?
ÄKTA.
Went on to be one of the fastest growing companies in America in both 2013 and 14, and was fully acquired by Salesforce Inc. in September of 2015. Now, John has got a podcast. He's, as I said, he's a philanthropist, but also I noticed something also cool in here. You're into luxury real estate investments in Mykonos, which is cool. That's a place I want to visit. So, by the way, before I let you get into here, John, I want to first of all, our show, we talk about what are you made of. It's all about things that you've turned into setbacks into rocket fuel, how you've advanced. You've been doing it since you were 11. But mainly is like, what do you go back to when things get tough or you have a setback? Like, what things you think back on and really fuel off of? And that's what this show is all about. So I want to hear your story. So John, what are you made of?
Well, thanks for having me, Mike. It's an awesome premise for a show. I'm excited to talk to you about it. As you said, I've been at this for, a long time, I guess, relative to my age. I started my first tech company at 14, and I've basically been doing it since. Most of that time was setbacks. I'm 36 now, so call it 22 years in the entrepreneurship game, and the majority of that was setbacks. So my first company I ever started at 14, a couple of years later, was a good company. We had employees and we had advertisements going around, and we were making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year when I was in high school. And then my best friend in the world stole that business from me and all the money with it. And so that was the lessons that I learned at age 17. My next company was a venture-backed video game marketing company when I was 21 in Los Angeles. We sold the business, and because of some legal issues that I wasn't aware of, I didn't own as much of the company as I thought I did. And I got screwed out of a lot of money in years of my life again. So, I learned some hard lessons early. And as I said, a lot of my time was learning through setbacks and through some very difficult lessons as being an entrepreneur. And then when I found, I guess success was at age 26. I created ÄKTA, the company you just referenced. And I was down on my luck at that point. I had been at it for over a decade with no real successes to show, only hard lessons. I was broke. I was incredibly broke. I was in debt. This was also as the economy was just starting to come back from a global recession. So it wasn't a great time to be starting a business for someone with no assets, with no investments, with no mentors, with no connections, with no co-founders. So I was kind of, alone in my journey, and I wanted to take one more crack at it. So when I created ÄKTA, my net investment was $800 in the business. That's all I had to put in on a Discover credit card. And 2 years later, it was one of the fastest growing companies in the world, throwing off, millions of dollars a year, and I still owned 100% of it. And it was a long time of hustling and grinding and trying to make anything work. And then all of a sudden, ultimate success, but both came with huge downsides. And even during the successful years, it was incredibly taxing to me, to my mental health, to just my own psyche of how do you now manage something that's successful? How do you be a 28-year-old CEO of one of the fastest growing companies in the world? Do you deserve any of it? Are you a fraud? Kind of the imposter syndrome stuff, depression, anxiety, ended up with substance abuse issues, all sorts of setbacks, until I suffered a complete mental breakdown at age 29. That put me in the hospital for about a week and almost killed me. So, there's been a lot of ups and downs before ultimately selling that business to Salesforce in 2015, as you referenced. And then, the last 5 years have been just reflection and relaxing and trying to understand what the hell has happened across the first 20 years of my adult life. So that's kind of the framing of who I am and what the story is. And so to answer the question, what do I look back to when I had these setbacks? I haven't always known, and I think it becomes more clear to me in retrospect. So I can look back and see what got me through, but in the moment, I didn't always know what it was. And I think at a high level, I've always had a lot of confidence in myself. I've forgotten that very often. There have been times where I have thought of myself as a complete loser and a complete failure and a fraud and all these different things. But at the end of the day, I've always trusted myself. I've trusted my gut, my instincts, my business acumen, my connections, my ability to sell and partner and to do the things you have to do as an entrepreneur. That's one of the things that I've always gone back to, and it's always done me right. The one person I can trust is myself, and I have truly used that to my advantage. Another is that, even though I didn't take advantage of it as much as I should, I've always had a great support system. And I've always leaned on my family and my friends and people who love me in times of need, even though very similarly to the confidence thing, I forgot about that as well. There were times where I said, I can't depend on anybody. I'm going to lock myself in a room and just grind. And that's a stupid way to handle things. And so when I was smarter about coping, it was going to people that I loved, like my friends and family, and saying, I need help. And saying, I need your support, or I need to hear something from you, or whatever. And so, there have been some consistencies, but I can say that in the moment with all of this, it's somewhere between impossible and very difficult to do those things sometimes.
Yeah, no, I can relate, man, to the holding yourself up sometimes and just grinding. And, actually this week was a rough week for me, man. I had to let some employees go. And that, I'm C-Roc. Everybody knows me as C-Roc. I'm always going, man. And I'm the one pumping people up. And people sometimes tend to forget the person that's pumping everybody else up needs it sometimes, in that encouragement too, because I do use setbacks and I use people that discourage me and talk trash as fuel, but you still
Right.
need some of the other stuff too, man. I mean, so when you're 11, you grew up in a supportive household. And how did you learn to program at 11, and who encouraged you, or how did that get started?
Yeah, I mean, supportive household, but not an entrepreneurial household. So my father was an immigrant from Venezuela and came over to learn English and study engineering, and then ended up working at Chrysler, at the auto manufacturer in Detroit. My mom was a stay-at-home mom taking care of 4 kids. So we did not have a lot of means. We were, between, upper, lower, or lower middle class kind of thing. We were fine as a family, but we didn't have any excessive means of any kind. So I lived a very kind of typical suburban life in Detroit. And again, my dad worked a corporate 9 to 5, suit and tie job. Mom stayed at home. So I had no guidance for what entrepreneurship was. Did not even know there was a term called entrepreneurship. That was all kind of brand new to me when I learned it. I'm just one of those people that was born with that gear that wants to solve problems, take risks, build things, test things, try things. That's just how I'm built. And so from age like 5 on, I was always finding I was like the one hustling the lemonade stand out front. I was, recruiting my neighbors and siblings to sell lemonade on my behalf so I could scale my lemonade stand. Like, that was my brain since I was a child. And so at 11, my dad brought home our first PC. So this is 1994. And I think it was like given to him as like a leftover at work when they upgraded their PCs. And so got stuck in our den. And I can't tell you why. It doesn't make sense to anybody, but I just fell in love with the damn thing. And it became, I understood it. I don't know why, because again, there's no technical people in my family at all. But for some reason, I understood it. I loved it. All I wanted to do was tear it apart and rebuild it and figure out how it worked and why it worked. And I taught myself programming starting that year, and I still do it to this day. So it's something I'm very passionate about. But ultimately, the computer just became my thing. Can't tell you why, it just did. And that's literally led, every venture that I've had since has been technology related.
Now, when you've had these companies and these products or services, the most important thing is to be able to get it to market and get it out of obscurity, right? And get it known.
Yeah.
And you could have the best product in the world. If nobody knows about it, nobody's going to buy it. Where did you get your marketing acumen, or find out how to market it, how to get out of obscurity and get that stuff out there?
I'll be honest, I am not very good at marketing. That is, for me, that is probably one of my weaker skill sets. I'm very good at sales, but they're 2 different things. So if you put me in a room with somebody, I will close that business. I mean, I could, I could sell snow to an Eskimo. Like, I can sell anything if you put me in the room. If you ask me to communicate my brand promise to 10 million people, that is not me. I'm not a growth hacker. I'm not a marketer. That is not how my brain works. And so The ventures where we've been marketing dependent, like my video game marketing company, for instance, we had marketers, we had a CMO and a marketing team that were the marketing minded brand building people. Where me, I was more executive leadership, sales, business development, partnerships, more of the handshaking kind of stuff. In ventures like ÄKTA, we were an innovation consultancy. We didn't need to market. I didn't need 10 million people to know I exist. I needed 30 to pay me millions of dollars. And so it was not a marketing challenge, it was a sales challenge. And that's probably why we were so successful. So that's probably one question I can admit I'm not terribly qualified to answer.
Well, and then how at 14, how did you know to get someone to help you and not just try it and then say, see, a lot of people, what they do is they try it and they say, man, I'm just not good at it. And they don't think about even, adults, but you were 14 when you had this situation. How did you know to hire your strengths?
Well, again, I think a little bit of that is that entrepreneurial intuition. Like as entrepreneurs, we have a sense for certain things, and that's why a lot of us are so common. You put like 10 of us at a dinner table, you'll find a lot of commonalities about our path, about how our brain works, about what excites us. Our brains are definitely built a certain way, and it's not a learned behavior, that is a born behavior. And so for me, I've always been pretty cognizant. I'm only good at a few things. My skill set is like 3 things. And so, but you need like 50 things to run a business successfully. So it always made sense to me, go find people who are good at those things and bring them into your camp. And so I'm kind of a master delegator, and I'm very humble about it. Like I don't want to be thought of as good at everything. Like I'm very communicative, that like, here's what I'm good at, and that's it. And my realm ends right there. So I need to accompany myself with the experts and everything else to make myself successful. And so I've always been very bullish on that, and that's how I've done every single venture I've ever had.
Love it. And then, so when you sold to Salesforce, how did you know when the right time was to sell?
Well, I almost died. So
Is that what it
that
was?
was a big indicator. When I went to the hospital, what was happening is that the business was going incredibly well, like so well. Even in the retrospect, it almost doesn't even make sense. I mean, I'm 28, 29 years old. I'm doing TED Talks. There's magazine covers. I've become a millionaire at 29. We're just crushing everything. We're expanding nationally. We have international plans on our mind. And as all of that's happening, behind the scenes, I am partying like an absolute maniac, just to offset the chaos. Like that was my way of escaping it all and raging against what was going on. It sounds crazy to even admit, but it's all obviously in the book that we're kind of here to talk about. But so it was drugs and sex and women and partying and private jets in Vegas, and that was my world. And so I split those things to handle each other. Like the self-destructive tendencies kind of helped me cope with this incredible risk and stress and pressure that I'd also built. And so I was doing this kind of ping pong match, which anyone who's ever done that will tell you does not end well. And so for me, when I ended up in the hospital, it was the worst week of my entire life. I woke up 3 days after being admitted with no recollection of what had happened for about a week prior. I was struggling to remember my own name, what city I was in, what anything had happened. I had suffered dissociative amnesia. They wondered if I had suffered a stroke. I was very close. I was closer to being dead than alive at that point. And it was a very scary thing. I had never confronted my own humanity in that way. I had confronted other people's. I had a couple ill family members. I had a friend pass away in high school, but I'd never confronted my own mortality. And to do that, at a young age is a hell of a thing, especially when it's all self-inflicted, right? It's not like I was crossing the street and got smoked by a car. I did this to myself. And then you have to really question, what are you doing and what matters? And so that was kind of my wake-up call to say, whatever I'm doing now is clearly not working. And if the source of both your success and your failure is the same thing, which is this business, you should not be doing it any longer until you get yourself sorted out. And so I started a process, hired an investment bank in Boston, and we ran a global, what's called a managed auction, where we took my business to over 100 prospective buyers, which were all the major tech companies, Google and Microsoft and everybody, including Salesforce and all the big agencies. We went to everybody. I ran around the world for 9 months doing a roadshow. I think I took 210 flights in 270 days or something like that. I mean, it was just obscene. And at the end of it, we had 6 offers from 6 very good firms, Salesforce being the best, and did a deal with them. And obviously, made more money than I've ever expected to be able to have. It was incomprehensible to me. But my biggest focus was, how do I get my mind and body right? And so when I took my leave from Salesforce, I spent 6 months with a doctor in Chicago. He was amazing. And I had to do a lot of work to recover from the damage that I had done. And I still work on it today. It's not like it ever ended, but I've been a much healthier, happier person since. And you alluded to Greece earlier. And so I traveled, I moved to Europe. I just enjoyed the hell out of life for a number of years, which is something that people don't do enough, even when they have the ability to. And now I'm back in the US, I'm here in New York, and I'm really focused on kind of what is the next chapter of my life going to be. So it's been a very interesting run.
Yeah, and the book he's talking about, guys, is A Practical Way to Get Rich and Die Trying. And it is available right now if you go to roa.com. That's roa.com/book.
Yeah, roa.com. Yeah.
Roa. I'm sorry, roa.com. Yep. Hey, try to pronounce my last name. That's why everybody calls me C-Roc.
No worries.
So roa.com, roa.com/book. Go get it and support John. And by the way, so I guess I partied back in the day too, man. And I remember at some point it's just stopped being fun. It was like a thing I had to do.
Sure.
I couldn't imagine anything else. Like there was things that would go through my head. If I was on a weekend, I'd be like, what are we supposed to do if we don't go out drinking? Like I can't comprehend that,
Yeah, it's not a good thing. And that happened with me too, 100%. It started at being very fun, right? Because I've always, since I've been a teenager, I've been working. I went to college, but not really traditionally. I didn't do the college kind of party thing. And so you start making a bit of money in your 20s, and all of a sudden the world opens up to you. You start discovering what places like Las Vegas are, and nightclubs are, and private jets are. And it's a very strange time to do that. And that's also why you see these the Justin Biebers of the world all melt down during that age time as well. It's a very vulnerable time to be a person and a man, I think. And so for me, it just became way too much fun at the beginning, and you had way too many options and access, and and it gets out of control. But to your point, it quickly gets to a point where it is not enjoyable. You are doing it because you are running from something or coping with something, and then you realize that a lot of people there with you are doing the exact same thing. And
you're
so
like
it's
you're like a prisoner to it, man.
And it can become a very toxic environment, because you realize that you're sitting at some table, everyone's, spending tens of thousands of dollars a night partying, and you look around and you're like, wow, we are all unhappy. There's not a single person here that's actually enjoying themselves right now. And that's a scary realization. And one that I definitely went through. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you sold the company, what was it like? Everybody thinks about that time where they're going to make money that they can't even imagine.
Yeah.
Can you explain the feelings and emotions that went on during that time after that, and just the kind of things that you went through after that? Because I know a lot of people listening, most of them will never get to that point in their life. Let's face it. And then some will. But what went on?
It's an incredibly surreal thing. So I had a taste of it. So again, my kind of financial timeline was growing up without any money. I'll never forget when I was like 23, I visited my sister in Chicago. She worked at a nightclub, and we went to see her. I'd never been to a nightclub, got all drunk. And then she put a $20 bill in my jacket pocket and put me in a taxi. I remember thinking to myself, like, damn, my sister must be loaded, like throwing around $20 bills like that. Like that's where I was in my early 20s. Like money was, I never had it, never seen it, never understood it, had none to my name. That was most of my life. And so start this company, and I'm broke at the time. And within 2 years, I'm making hundreds of thousands of dollars. And 2 years later, I'm making millions. And it's a very, very strange trajectory to go through, because I'm sure if you've grown up with it or even around it, you can have some context to what money is. If you've never seen it before, it becomes a very polarizing thing, because in some ways it's great, right? Because all of a sudden you have financial freedom and you can acquire things that you never thought you could. You can have experiences that have been, things you only read about on, in newspapers or something. But at the same time, it quickly starts to ostracize you from people, and especially your peers, because no one else is making that kind of money. So all of a sudden you cannot relate to your friends and your family. You suddenly don't know what to do with it, and it starts to feel like a burden that you have this. Now, what are you supposed to spend it on? You start acquiring stupid shit. For me, I I don't even know, 20 something like luxury watches, like hundreds of thousands of dollars in watches. And I had multiple cars, even though I had no reason even for one. Um, you know, I used to make like 30 grand a year, and now I take a $30,000 private jet, which is just the dumbest, most egregious thing in the world. Like we don't need that. And so then you start feeling bad about your own like dumb financial decisions and start just cycling and cycling. So as a young person, it can be very detrimental to come across that kind of money. And then when you sell the company, that's an even crazier thing, because at least that had some like step up to it. You know, you're making a little bit, you're making a bit more. And then selling the company, first of all, the process is one of the hardest things in the world. And we often read the headline, so and so acquires so and so for X millions of dollars. We never hear about how difficult and taxing that actual process is. It is insane. I mean, you are talking endless, important, like critical razor sharp meetings that you have to be on for every day for months and months and months and months. And everyone is jockeying to win the game, the buyers, the sellers, and things are coming and going. And there's a deal that comes in, then something, you know, deal gets killed, money on the table is now gone. You know, you get your hopes up here, you get dashed here, and it is a psychologically damning game. But at the end of it, for me, you know, there was this chunk of money. And you know, you watch the movies, you've read the news articles, but has anyone ever told you like how that actually happens at the end? And I remember thinking about it, I'm like, so I see like contracts, I know we have these meetings, but how do I get paid? Like what is going to happen? Because I like no one tells you. And it's one of those things, I'm sure, like when you win the lottery, you're like, well, does someone to like show up with a check? Or like, it is the most surreal
Where do
thing.
I go?
And,
Where do I go? What do I
and
do?
plus you're like, I'm not going to go ask somebody because you feel like an idiot, right? So I never forget, like I had shipped, you know, they had my banking information and stuff. And I'm sitting at lunch with a buddy in San Francisco. I just left Salesforce. And this sounds so stupid. I was sitting there refreshing the Chase checking app on my phone. I wasn't even sure that's how it was going to happen, but I'm like, that's the only way they had to pay me. And I'm like, I wonder if it's just going to appear in like my checking account. And literally over lunch, I was like sweating, and it was, you know, I was so nervous. And I hit the refresh button, and all of a sudden, like my you know, whatever it's called, the available balance, like my checking account was the full transaction to sale. And I was just like, what the fuck is that? I mean, it was the
Holy
most
shit, man.
surreal moment of my life. And I remember I've transferred $1 million from my checking account to my savings account just to see if it would work. And it did. And I was like, holy crap, it's real. And that's, but it's a very, very strange process. Thankfully, I'd had a little bit of experience with money before that moment. So I didn't go as crazy then. I'd kind of done it in the years prior. But man, is that a strange time of somebody's life? You
And
know?
then you kind of realize like it's just digits on a computer screen or a
Yeah,
phone.
nothing
Like,
changes. Nothing changes.
Yeah.
No one shows up with like a guide to what you're supposed to do as like a rich person now. No one, you know, most people don't give a shit, which is a good thing. Like most people are not impressed by it. Most people, you know, don't care. The people that do are genuinely not those you want in your life. So people that all of a sudden want to be friends with me, or vice versa, they were less important to me than people who have been there the whole time. They were like, cool, you got money. Who gives a shit?
Yep.
The coolest part with me is that I've had a lot of people in my life that have supported me, and I was able to kind of go back and support more. Siblings, parents, friends, and that's been really freaking cool.
That's what
As
I love,
well as
man.
just,
Yeah.
you know, yeah, that's been the coolest part, as well as be able to do things that you just never thought you could. Like for me, moving to Greece, building a house, living there for 3 years, like that doesn't make sense. Like that, you're not supposed to be able to do that. And so that was kind of the first time I felt like, wow, I'm now experiencing the benefit for all the work that I put in.
Right. And now let me ask you this real quick on this one, because when you think about, so I write my goals down every day because I got to stay clear, because sometimes if I don't, I just get all over the place and then I forget what I'm trying to go after. Right. And it sounds ridiculous to do it every day, but I do. My mentor is Grant Cardone. I'm not sure if you know who Grant Cardone is. He told us to do that, but I take my homies with me as one of my goals. Now, not to have an entourage, not like the ballers do, right? But to take people around me that have supported me and believed in me all these years, and my family, of course, too. But I write that down because that means something to me. And I'm glad you said that. That means a lot. When you're, what's been your biggest go-to-market breakthrough in your time at any of the companies?
Honestly, as it's kind of going with the marketing thing, that's never been my specialty. I've never tried to launch a company that's like needed critical mass or virality. That's not my game. I am a kind of in-person hustler. You put you put me at a dinner table, I will close the hell of the dinner table. But like, I am not, the go-to-market guy. I couldn't have launched a Instagram or a TikTok like that. That would never, ever, ever be my business. Like, I'm much more kind of a slow burn, relationship based kind of business person. So yeah, that is definitely not my
Really.
specialty.
And then one other, there's a couple questions coming in from friends of mine that I thought
Yeah.
that I was having you on the show. How do you take feedback from your tribe without losing sight of the purpose of the tech? Now that's something, again, I don't get this question because this comes from a guy that's in the tech world, but
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of understand it, but.
Well, I want to broaden the question. I hope he doesn't mind, but because again, even though I'm a technical guy, I've never created a literal tech company. I've never built tech. It's always been tech enabled. But like ÄKTA was a design consultancy. The video game marketing company was like the ESPN of esports. So I've always been in technology enabled companies, but I've never built like a piece of hardware or anything. But more importantly, how do you take feedback, I think, is important. And the way that I've always done it, which is really critical to me, is to do two things and be very focused on it. Number one is to limit who you take feedback from, because I think that we are over inundated with advice. And people ask me for advice all the time. Like, hey, Roa, can we get on the phone? And I need your advice on something. And my feedback to them is always like, how many guys are you asking like me? Because at some point, we are going to start to contradict each other. At some point, we are going to start to not know what we're talking about and just want to be helpful, but actually we are not the expert on what you're asking. The more advice you get, the less effective it becomes. So I've always been on the mindset of only have a few people at any given time that I really care about what they say, and then listen to the hell out of everything they tell me and really kind of engage in that, respect it, and follow that advice instead of just asking it for everybody and seeing kind of what shakes out. I think we've seen a lot with entrepreneurship where advice can be like a complete crucifix. Like it is a way to die on something because we take too much of it. We want to follow it all, but then we get very confused. And so I've always kept people in a very tight camp of who I listen to and with what, and with everything else, I try to ignore it and push it out of my purview.
Yeah, it's like taking a blueprint from someone for success and then stacking the blueprints on top of each other from all the ones you got from a whole bunch of different people, and then trying to read it, right?
I tell somebody, if you were to read 10 motivational books or listen to 10 motivational speeches, you'd be so fucking confused. You know what I mean? Like
a lot of people are doing that.
Which one do I listen to? I know they are. And that's
bad,
one of my
man.
biggest gripes with self-help, with motivational stuff, with coaching, is because we're all just guessing. Just because I've been successful and made money does not mean I know much else than anybody else. It really doesn't. But we listen to people too much, and too many of them. I've met these entrepreneurs who have like stacks of books from all the known suspects, just stacks of them. And they read and read and read, think that's going to get them there. And it's like, I bet that every point is contradicted somewhere else. All you're going to do is confuse yourself. Now, if you were to isolate somebody that you resonate with, if you're like, that person thinks like me, they act like me, I want to be like them, then isolate them and listen to just that. But don't think that the more you consume, the better you're going to be off. It's probably the exact opposite.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've done with Grant, man. I've just stuck with the same thing and like swim in the Kool-Aid, immerse myself in.
Yeah.
Because he sounds like me. I mean, not sounds like me, but I can relate with him, and he's where I want to be.
Yeah.
So, but John, listen, I want to thank you for coming on the show. Guys, again, Practical Way to Get Rich and Die Trying is the book. Roa.com, ROA.com/book. Go get it. Support John. And by the way, besides that link there, is there social handles that you want them to engage with you on, or how could they?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm John Roa, JOHNROA on Instagram and Twitter. And then my podcast, so we actually just relaunched kind of a new version of it. It's called Between Us. And I talk to incredibly successful people about their journeys and their lives. So we just had like Dr. Drew Pinsky. We had Amanda Knox, who spent 4 years in jail in Italy for a murder she didn't commit. We have David Rubenstein next week, who's the founder of the Carlyle Group. So incredibly diverse set of people who have all overcome the biggest journeys in life. And we have these really cool, intimate conversations. So that's called Between Us. And the social media for that is betweenus_pod. So those are my social handles. Would love to connect with anybody who's listening.
Thanks, John. I appreciate you coming on the show, and hope we can do some things together in the future, man.
Definitely. Thanks, Mike.
All right. You guys have been listening to the What Are You Made Of podcast with your boy, Mike C-Roc. Thank you so much for joining us. Be good.